Hello, Assurance family, and welcome to Daily Assurance. I am so glad that you're here with us as we go through the scriptures and have a brief devotion on the scriptures. And as we continue in this time of social distancing in our country, I know that there is probably a lot of anxiety right now, a lot of maybe even fear, as we talked about yesterday with Pastor Daniel's message. And I wanted to read to you a passage from the Apostle Paul, found in my favorite book in the Bible, which is Paul's letter to the Philippians. And to give you background into this book, you probably heard me say this many times in sermons because I love this book so much, that Paul is writing this particular letter from prison. And yet we call it the epistle, the letter of joy, which is fascinating because he's writing out of a spirit of faith. He's writing out of a spirit of assurance as he is socially isolated in a prison cell. And so he can understand where we're coming from as we kind of feel cooped up and feel like we can't go places and go through our normal routine. And yet somehow, because of his faith, he writes a letter we call the epistle of joy. And I wanted to read you these words that are in the latter part of the letter. Starting in verse 4 of chapter 4, Paul says this: "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice." Now pause there for a second. He's saying this while he's in prison, and he's saying rejoice. This is fascinating stuff. He goes on to say, "Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near." Let your gentleness, your kindness, your compassion be evident to all. And I think that definitely speaks to us in this time now as we are trying to act in ways that put those who are most vulnerable to the virus first, right? And so he's saying, let your gentleness be evident to all. And then he goes here, listen to this. I got a feeling many of you are going to resonate with this. He says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God." Do not be anxious about anything. And that's hard for me because as soon as I start thinking what may happen because of all this going on around us, I start to become anxious, whether it's my own personal life, whether it's the church, whether it's friends and family, whether it's all of you. Anxiety starts to rise in my soul. And I have a feeling many of you are the same boat because what is happening around us is rather serious and has possible ramifications, right? Long beyond just what we're doing at this moment. And yet he is saying here, do not be anxious about anything. And so when that anxiety arises in your soul, go to God in prayer and petition. And then he says this, after you present your request to God, he says, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Boy, oh boy, do I want that peace of God right now. And I'm sure you do as well. Whether it's anxiety or fear in regards to what's happening around us in our country and our world, whether it's anxiety or fear about getting the virus, whether it's anxiety or fear about the fact that this could hurt our economy and you're worried about your job, I get it. I'm in the same boat. I think about those things as well. And that anxiety and that fear starts to creep into my soul. And so, like Paul says, I go to God. I go to God in prayer. And I ask for his peace to overwhelm me. And I like what Paul says there. He says, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. It doesn't make sense. Because if I focus on the way of the world and what the world is saying to me, that peace doesn't make sense. Because why would I have peace when everything around me seems to be chaotic and going in ways that are beyond my control? Why would I have that peace? And yet, Paul says God can still give you that peace. And it reminds me of when I was a kid. Years ago, I think I shared this with you in a sermon, but I want to share it again. When I would be anxious as a child, my mother would sing a song to me. And it was a song that she got from a movie or a mini-series called, I think it was called The Electric Grandma. I'm not making this up. But the song is a song she sang to me. And she sings it to my son as well. And when my son was growing up, I would sing it to him also when he was a baby and then a toddler. And he still knows the song today. And when I was a kid and I would get anxious, she would sing this song to me. She would put her hands on my head and she would sing this to me. And yes, I'm going to sing. My voice is terrible, but I'm going to sing it anyway. She would sing this song and it would say, "Lonnie, Lonnie, Never you fear, trouble won't trouble you, now that I'm here. And I know the secrets that good mothers know. Trust me to love you and help you to grow. And she sang that to me when I was a kid, and I sang it to Preston, and sometimes honestly still do. And reflecting upon that, when she would do that for me, this peace be all understanding would take over my soul, and I would be okay. And I mention that because I think that's what Paul is talking about, that as we become adults and we mature, we think that those things are behind us. We think we don't need to be comforted in that way, but we do, because sometimes the world seems to overwhelm us. And so my encouragement for you today is to go to God in prayer and petition, to bring your request to God during this time, and to ask him to overwhelm you with that peace that transcends all understanding, to remind you that no matter what we are going through, God is still God, and God is above all of this, and God can work in all of this, and God has not left you, and he never will. God bless you. See you tomorrow.